Hello, students. Today we are going to be doing something a little different than we've done before, in that we are going to be drawing and painting a still life. I'm hoping that you guys already know what a still life is, but I also want to clarify for you how you can do this in an interesting way and in the way that I would like for you to be successful in this process. So, step number one is obviously for you to set up a still life. So here is a far away shot of my still life setup. You want to have at least 6 objects. I also recommend that you put those objects on an interesting surface, and fabric is really great for that. And set up a light that is casting really nice intense shadows, and then take a bunch of pictures, right? So this is just to show you the setup. And then once you've taken a bunch of pictures, you are going to choose the photo that you think looks best of those objects. And we are going to start off just drawing them first, and then part 2 is actually color. So obviously when it comes to drawing objects, we're going back to the basics where it's dealing with simple shapes. So nice cylinders and like shapes that have some level of symmetry to them, but are also in perspective. And we're not going to worry about color or anything yet. But hopefully your piece already has some really nice color, like continuity to it, some really nice shadows and highlights that are easy to see. And it also is made up of objects that maybe you personally actually like, instead of just a random array of, I don't know, dishes or dirty laundry, right? So choose some nice objects with some different shapes. All right, so I'm pulling that over onto my other screen. Let me do that. Okay. So I have that up for me to reference as I draw. Pretty easy and simple. The other next simple step to this is not so much that we're doing it digitally, of course, right? I'm just going to go over a lot of the basics of how to actually draw using perspective and simple shapes. So we're going to make a layer. We're going to call it sketch. And you are going to use a very standard generic brush. Hopefully you can see my brush options now. I was having an issue before a screen recording that it didn't actually show like the windows I was opening and selecting. So just a standard hard edge brush with shape dynamics checkmarked and nothing else. Make sure that you are just painting with black. And you also want for your brush to be really nice and small, smaller. That's probably good. All right, so usually how I get started off with things is I draw some very generic blobs so that I know where things are going to go. So I'll say, here's where my fan is going to go, and here is where that container I have is going to go, and then here's where my mug is going to go. And then there's this picture frame back here with a butterfly in it. And then there's a whole bunch of flowers up here. And then I'm going to look at it and say, is that right? And I'm going to adjust things accordingly. So maybe one of the first things I'm going to do is use my Control T to pull things to better fit my composition. This is why I love Photoshop so much. It's so easy to do that. And if I'm extra lazy, I can even say, oh, I want for this to be further over. So I'll select it and just actually move it to where I want for it to be. And then now that I have that very slobby base done, I can make an additional layer and work on top. I can use as many layers as I want, or I can work all on the one. That's fine too. I think for today, I'm in the mood to just do it all on the one layer. I think that'll be fine because I can clean up my lines easily, right? So I'm not too worried about those things. So I'm just going to go object by object and work my way through. When I go object by object, I like to start with the object that's in front. So that'd be this one, and then this guy, and then this guy, and then this guy, and then that guy. Cool. Also know that I can take some liberty if I want to have some fabric wrapping around differently than it was in the piece. I can add that in. If I don't want to draw the outlet that was back here on the wall, I obviously don't need to draw that, and I can change it to be whatever I would like. Okay. All right, so let's start with object number 1. Now, this object is a kind of interesting shape, and it's also in perspective. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this shape with a center line going this way, and it has a little bit of a peaked center. So I'm going to go ahead and find that center point. And then I'm going to adjust these lines accordingly. Don't forget that you can use your shift key to make perfectly straight lines. However, I usually like for my lines to have a little bit more like suggestion to them. Maybe something a little bit more than just a singular perfect straight line. Because if that singular line isn't exactly right, it's going to kind of throw things off. Whereas my sketchy line sometimes has a little bit more forgiveness. And I want my eraser to be something a little different. Remember, your eraser is set up just like your other brushes. So let's make it just a regular hard edge eraser. Something also to keep in mind is fabric many times creates triangular shapes. It's not just the lumpy, loopy guys. And sometimes giving your fabric a little bit more structure can be really nice. And it can also direct the eye. Notice the way I'm placing this fabric is going to lead the eye in, and then I might have something up here leading the eye back out. Or wrapping even back in and around again. Yes, I'm drawing all the nice little ornate details on this container. Of course, I'm not going to totally finish them off. It's just enough to lead me when we get into color. Now, we're not tracing this because tracing is lame. And actually being able to draw and interpret things in the way that you see them can be far more interesting than a traced image. If you attempt to trace it, I'm not an idiot. I'll be able to tell. I'm going to force you to do it over again. So just do it by hand right off the bat. It's more satisfying as well to actually create something and understand something more deeply. Now, obviously, while I'm doing this, you can draw along with me. You can also fast forward through parts of this just so that you catch the major components. Or you can sit there and watch me while you eat something and then work on your own. So I think that's enough structure for me to work with before I get into color. So we're going to leave it at that. Now, let's get into our mug. It would be smart for you to have at least one mug in your piece. And notice I'm still drawing a center line because I want for this mug to have some level of symmetry. Cool. And then I want for the body of the mug to also have symmetry to it. You can always use tricks for this. If you want to draw one side of your mug, copy it and flip that layer so that way you have a perfectly symmetrical mug. That would be kind of cool. And of course, once I get deeper into things, I can use my eraser to take out some excessive lines or clean up to show which line it is I've committed to. And if you are one of those people that doesn't have a iPad or are very uncomfortable attempting to draw with a mouse, if you're being forced to try to work through that, you can hand sketch this, take a picture, and bring that into Photoshop to then color. That's also perfectly fine. And if you're really, really struggling, I can always direct you to the foundation drawing and painting videos I have for doing the same project by hand. So that one's actually in some ways more involved than this because I expect for you guys being a little bit older to know some of these basics on how to draw these objects. So if you need that extra support, I'll direct you over in that direction. Just make sure to let me know in Zoom or GChat or whatever way you prefer to communicate. Once again, I'm not getting crazy into the details, but I do want to let myself know where this little iconic plaque on my mug is going to go before I get into painting. All right, so now let's move over to this fan. And once again, I love drawing my center lines. I think they're so helpful so that I know where this little notch is going to go. That actually shows how this fan works. I'm going to go ahead and erase some of these lines so I'm not fighting with them later. And this fan makes a little bit of like a heart shape. Now, I'm not totally sure how I'm going to paint this fan. I've never painted anything like this before, so that'll be interesting. Same thing for if you are realizing now while you're drawing your object, you're like, oh, holy cow, I picked glass, and I don't know how to paint glass. It's not so much about painting a particular type of material. It's more about figuring out light and shadow on every single object and trying to simplify it down to the clearest way that you can. which is why sometimes those shadows and stuff will help you a lot. So in my photo, this picture frame back here is quite squared off, and I might want to fake it and put it in a little bit more perspective than it is in my original photo. It's okay for you to do that. If you want to change something to make your drawing more successful, that's totally fine. And this butterfly is kind of going to be my focal point in a way, so I want to make sure when it comes to painting that I take the time to make it look really nice. Oh, and also, I know you guys can't tell, but I am constantly looking back and forth between my reference picture and my drawing to make sure that I'm getting things right. I don't memorize what every butterfly looks like. I need to refer to my photo to make sure that I get placements and shapes and everything in the right direction. All right. So we're starting to get there. For me, drawing digitally in some ways is easier than drawing on paper. I know for some of you guys it depends on the level comfortable you are with a particular thing. If you're more comfortable digital than pencil, that's cool. You might be sick of sitting in front of your computers as well, though. So if you really need to take a break from being in front of your screen, do this process by hand. I sometimes like to already draw in some shadows too, to act as some guidelines for me. And there's this whole little scene on my fan that I'm not going to actually paint in right now because I'm already thinking through how I might be painting that fan later. All right. Flowers are beautiful and wonderful to have in your piece. They're super easy to do because nobody's going to know if I got them to look accurate to your photo or not. However, what I will say is you do definitely need to have overlapping when it comes to bouquets or pretty much any flower or pretty much any even still life. So what I recommend doing is starting with the leaf or flower that is technically quote unquote in front of your other objects and draw that in first. And then you basically just stack back as you go. So if this is my first leaf here, then I'm going to draw in the next leaf a little bit further back that's similar, right? And then the next leaf and the next leaf. So here's almost like my front row of leaves. And then I have some long pieces coming out of this bouquet. And then I have some of these weird little lumpy floral dudes that are coming from behind. And notice I know where to stop because I have my front leaf established, so it's not too confusing. Yes. And then I have some of these cool little round spiky flowers. And stems. And so I'm going to work through this. I'll probably speed through some of this for you guys so you don't have to sit there and watch me draw every one of these. Although I'm pretty fast, so. Oh, yes, that being said, I'm pretty fast. I do not expect for you to do your still life drawing in a half hour, okay? I expect for it to take you much longer than it's taking me, and I also expect a higher quality of drawing than what I'm doing, where you're showing me that you're really thinking through every object and trying to establish it in space and already taking into consideration some of the colors and shapes and stuff that you're going to do moving forward when we get into color. All right, so now I need to decide what I want to have going on over here. Because my light source is coming so strong from this left-hand corner, I don't want to have a window or anything over here. I think that'd be a little too distracting. So maybe we'll just have some draped fabric coming down this direction. Once again, I know that fabric makes triangles. And on my fabric that I chose, there's these cool little bees. So I might want to lightly suggest where some of these are going to go. Now know that, of course, because we're doing this in Photoshop, you can always use, or Krita, you can always use like some of the cheats we have used before. So if you're like, I really don't want to hand paint all of this pattern on every bit of fabric, so instead I'm going to find an image online and stick that image to my paint layer and set it to something like overlay or multiply. By the way, you can do in Krita. I hope you guys have taken some time to figure that out. All right. So there is an acceptable level of drawing for our first part of this project. Okay. Notice that the reason why this is a successful still life drawing is because I have a large number of objects really closely grouped together, so there's lots of overlapping. And I also took the time to really set up my, let me see if I can pull this over for you again one more time. I really took the time to set up my still life to be what I want for it to be. Notice now that I have my still life picture next to my drawing here, they're not identical, and I don't want for them to be identical. I've made some choices in my drawing that I think are going to be better for me than if I was just straight up trying to trace or figure out things from my photo. Cool. So definitely do think through and find the actual nice like architecture and shapes and 3D-ness of your objects. Once you've gotten to this point, as per usual, make sure to share it with me. Make sure that you have it on a sketch layer so we can paint above or below or both when we get into painting. And remember, you can check in with me at any point in time while you're working on this project. Happy drawing, and I will chat with you guys soon. Bye.